money that they spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. An acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for hemp. Yeah.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to the Time for Hemp broadcast all around the world on AmericanFreedomRadio.com and on AM/FM stations all across America. Before I delve into tonight's topic, I know I'm going to get lost in it, so let me do this first. I want to say thank you to KDK Distributors. You're an amazing group of people. Because of you, we have a loud voice, and we are able to be strong. I also want to thank the DEA, FBI, and CIA for tuning in. Remember, you are being paid to take notes, so do, and share them with your coworkers so you can let them know why they are losing this war on drugs. Now, tonight's broadcast is dedicated to Tyler Clementi. It was really sad news to wake up and hear that a bright, talented young man had jumped to his death because some clown decided to stream onto the internet his sexual activities. Now, whether he was doing it with another man or another woman or by himself makes no difference. No one wants that streamed onto the internet. What makes it even more sad is he had a beautiful life ahead of him. And I can honestly tell you that when I woke up Sunday morning, I remember saying to myself how lucky I am to still be alive. Now, why do I say that? Well, I had heard that right after it was reported on the news that currently, right now, suicide is the third leading cause of death in America for today's youth. And I relate to that. I'm bipolar. I don't normally talk about this on the air. It's my business, it's my cross to bear. I can also tell you I understand what it's like to wish the heck that you were dead. Between the age of 9 and the age of 29, I attempted suicide on 8 different occasions. On 2 of those occasions, I succeeded. The EMTs brought me back to life when they arrived to the house on one occasion. And on another occasion, a doctor at the hospital was dedicated to saving lives, and it was my life he saved. Later, I was diagnosed as bipolar. Now I'm on medication, and I have an understanding as to why it was. I sought out a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Well, I've been given a forum to speak from, and I want to use this radio show for something good. So if you're at home thinking that the world might be a better place if you were not here, if you're thinking that maybe tomorrow the world would be better if you were gone, do me a favor and listen one more hour to people who have been in your shoes and really love you and want to remind you the importance of taking every breath and enjoying every laugh. Because when you take your life, whether you know it or not, when you die, you suck the life out of those around you. So, before you decide that you think it might be time to kill yourself, why not take a moment and take time for hemp?
Excuse me for a moment while I vent about the mind-boggling stupidity of the autocratic, bureaucratic, right-wing, Neanderthal numbskulls who keep pushing an insane, inane, and inhumane holy war against marijuana, which is, after all, a weed. The most embarrassing thing for these holy warriors is that the weed is winning. They've been at this war since 1937, spending billions and billions of our tax dollars, militarizing our borders, and stomping on our Bill of Rights. They've used phone taps, garbage searches, jackbooted raids, and draconian prison terms to do what? To nab peaceful, mellow tokers who aren't bothering anyone, that's what. Despite 60 years of spending our money, they failed. 85% of Americans say marijuana is easy to obtain today. A third of our population says they've tried it. Nearly 15 million people partake of it at least monthly, and more high school students now smoke marijuana than cigarettes. Meanwhile, the holy warriors have become more fanatical and thuggish. A marijuana arrest is made every 41 seconds in America, 9 out of 10 of them for mere possession. In 2004, 772,000 Americans were arrested on marijuana charges, more than for all violent crimes combined. And 40,000 Americans are in prison today for this victimless crime, more than the entire prison populations of 8 European countries. Even sicker, the sanctimonious weed warriors have made it a crime for thousands of seriously sick people to get the medical benefits of using small amounts of doctor-prescribed marijuana. Weirdly, our doctors can prescribe cocaine for patients, but not marijuana. This is Jim Hightower saying, for information and action to stop this absurd war, call the Marijuana Policy Project, 202-462-5747.
This may sound strange, but I want to pay taxes. See, I don't drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes. I relax with something science has proven is much safer, marijuana. And I want to buy it somewhere that charges taxes to pay for schools and roads, just like alcohol and tobacco. What do you think should profit? Are schools and roads or drug dealers?
Visit the Marijuana Policy Project Foundation at joinmpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
narcotic.
Oh, yes, I like very much.
Radio. You're an American institution. American Freedom Radio.
Yeah, I do. I wake, I bake, I do whatever it takes to get me through the day. And as you know, from the top of the hour, I don't always roll out of the rack feeling pretty darn happy. Some mornings I wake up feeling pretty sad. But I'm bipolar. I've learned to deal with it. When I start feeling as if maybe the world would be a better place without me, I realize it's a chemical imbalance. And it's not me at all. I'm lucky. I found a solution to my problem. Smoking pot does help. But there are a lot of people who have not been so lucky. Now, you think you're alone? Before we go to my guest, I want to let you know that you're not alone. There's a lot of people who deal with this. Famous people, Jim Carrey, Patty Duke, Robert Downey Jr., to mention a few. Yes, Jim Carrey, as a matter of fact. Mike Wallace. And these people are people who've also admitted to attempting suicide. Margaret Kidder, Vivian Lee, Spike Mulligan, David Stockard, Tracy Ullman, Robin Williams. It's a long list of people. So look, Tim Burton, really, Francis Ford Coppola. If you're sitting at home and you really think that the world would be better without you, I got news for you. The world's a crappy place anyway. It won't be. Stop thinking that way. My guest tonight, Lennice Werth, has been down this path before. She also has a lot to talk to this topic about. When I heard the news over the weekend about Tyler, it really grieved me. Yes, I'm openly gay. Yes, I felt like killing myself when I was a teenager because I wasn't born right. I got over it. I learned to accept myself for who I am. Learn to love yourself and be your own best friend. Isn't that right, Lennice?
Oh, absolutely, Casper.
And Lennice Werth, I want to thank you for taking time for hemp.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Lennice, normally I would have you on to talk about all the wonderful things that medical marijuana can do. But there is just an epidemic going on right now. We have soldiers coming home from overseas who've seen so much in battle they want to die. We have children in high school and in elementary who are killing themselves because they have no other answers. People in the Gulf Coast who have had jobs for 20 years and been able to feed their families now cannot feed themselves and turn to suicide as a solution. You've had suicide in your family, haven't you?
Well, yes, I have. And it's a tragedy. It leaves the family absolutely torn apart. I think what we have to remember, you mentioned the chemical imbalance. And I've had the privilege of listening to Dr. Robert Melamede talk about chemical imbalances in our body. Have you heard him speak?
No, I've not had that opportunity.
Well, he talks about the chemicals in our body that are similar to the chemicals in cannabis and how this modern world that we live in is stressful and our bodies weren't really intended to deal with this kind of stress, the level of stress that we have every day, and that cannabis-type chemicals, the endocannabinoids, are the things that keep us balanced. But he says that if you get low on these chemicals, then you are absolutely, it's the best thing to do to replace them with the cannabis in the environment, the naturally occurring cannabinoids that you can get out of the environment. And I think that's a real key to this sometimes.
Now that explains to me why it was my own family physician who had known me as a child told me in my late 20s, early 30s that the best thing for me would be marijuana.
I think he was ahead of his time, don't you? I think that's great.
I do.
Told you, yeah.
Because his concern was that if he gave me a prescription, I could easily overdose on the prescription, and then on top of that, there's all the side effects that come with those prescriptions.
That
and his
could have
comment
saved
was
your life.
Well, yeah, because he said he had patients who dealt with depression who were elderly, who from losing their spouse or just dealing with age or illness that they just lost their happy will to live, and he would encourage them to smoke pot, and he felt it was just, it kept you balanced, it kept you right, and not too happy and not too sad, just right in the middle where you need to be.
Yeah, I think it's a very I think that's exactly what Dr. Melamede talks about is the balancing effect of this. And it's not just your moods; it's other body systems. You know, salt and potassium and calcium and all these chemicals. The balance, and we don't really understand the brain and how it works and these moods and the mood disorders. But one thing that's very obvious from a lot of people's experience, they see that this is a very balancing substance.
You deal with bipolar too, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Now, when you smoke your herb, do you also get that right in the middle feeling?
Well, I guess it's a different experience for a lot of us. And oftentimes I think that the bipolar thing is probably several different disorders that we experience. We're not really... I don't know how. For me, it allows me to mentally modify the way I'm feeling. I mean, I'm able to talk myself out of very negative moods, and also moderate, things when I'm too happy. If you know what I'm saying.
I do know.
Yeah, because I don't think that hurts. It doesn't hurt you if you experience that. It doesn't hurt you, but it does hurt your relationships with other people. It can. It has that potential.
It does. Now, when people think of the idea that, just smoking pot, how can smoking pot really take care of this horrible feeling of wanting to off myself, and it's just going to be a temporary buzz, but really it's not either. When the buzz comes down, you still have that the world's okay, I'm okay feeling. It truly is an act of medicating.
You realize that for just one flash of a moment, you get your chemicals, your body chemicals right or a little better in a better place, and you realize things are going to be okay, that you can work your way through this and you're going to be all right. And then, even as the effect of the drug or the chemicals might wear off, you remember what you thought. And your thinking, what you're thinking has changed. So, I mean, I think we like to talk about cannabis for all kinds of things, glaucoma and chemotherapy, but it's that psychoactive element to it that everybody likes to put down and say, oh, no, you just want to get high. It's that psychoactive element to it that can be so useful in situations like this.
Well, and it's also true of the disease. Sometimes people think, oh, well, he's not really, or she's not really trying to kill him or herself. They're just looking for attention. They're going about it the wrong way. And that is not true. They don't really recognize that inside that person's mind, the only option for their path at that point is death. It really is their only option.
Wow. And we just have to get people through that moment without having them destroy themselves.
That's not an easy thing to do. Now,
right.
Before we move forward on this, I want to remind people out there that you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. And for God's sake, please, if you feel like you're ready to leave the earth, call these people first, smoke a joint, and think about it. I mean, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Now, when you reach out into the community and you deal with this, how do you start to cope with this, and how do you approach other medical people in the medical field as using marijuana as a solution to this?
Well, that really depends on the individual, because some doctors aren't as open-minded as others. I've talked to doctors all across the spectrum. I think that's why it's really, really important. And some doctors really get this. And if you're a patient in this situation, I think you have to find a doctor or a healthcare professional, or a counselor that you can trust Now, you do have to be careful, especially in states where it's not legal. You have to be careful. But you need somebody to talk to. It could really be anybody that you can really trust and who is going to talk you through the bad times. That's a great thing to have.
You said that you've dealt with it in your family. Now, how does each family member, I mean, you can't go like mom like this and dad like this, but how are people affected? I mean, like some people think when they go to kill themselves, no one will care. I could fall off the face of the earth tomorrow, and really, until the landlord discovers me and the rent's not paid, no one's going to care.
Well, people may think that, but in fact, when somebody goes that way, everybody around them feels guilty. And you think you think nobody loves you, and I can just tell every single human being out there that is not true. There is somebody on this earth, and probably, and in a small measure, all of us on this earth truly love each individual. It is highly loved. That's just my feeling about it. But everybody who loves you is going to be so hurt if something bad happens to you. And that's what we experienced in my family when a relative, did this. And my God, it's just taken years for us to even get back to where we were. And it's just tough on a family. This is the worst thing. A death is very difficult in a family, but it's many multiples of 2 or 3 times worse to deal with this type of death. So, I mean, I'm not talking about situations where people are terminally ill and they're making an irrational decision. There are,
right.
I'm actually in favor of, some types of assisted suicide. If there's horrible situations where that's actually a rationally well thought out solution, and of course that's illegal in most all the country too. But
right.
But that's a whole separate issue. You and I, we know what we're talking about. Everybody who's listening, we know what we're talking about. We're talking about a functioning, physically healthy human being, but not necessarily mentally healthy. And in that moment, whatever's going through your mind, you have to go through it in the state of life. You have to really understand that your life is so valuable to the people around you.
And on top of that, too, there are some people who think, well, I'll get even with so-and-so, I'll just kill myself. And they don't seem to realize, well, they might have got even with so-and-so, but they also hurt about 20 other people permanently for life when they do that.
Right, and they probably, don't even hate so-and-so that much. You know what I'm saying? I mean, whoever so-and-so is, it's probably somebody they really love and who loves them. And it's irrational, It's not a good. There's not going to be a relationship after that. So come on, let's see what that relationship, how that goes tomorrow. It's.
Now the other.
We're right in what you say, but also this is not the way to deal with a relationship.
And the other thing too is people would say, well, how come you didn't see the warning signs? How come you didn't notice that they were getting ready to off themselves? I mean, you can go on the Internet and look up warning signs of suicide and come up with 100 different websites.
Is that after the fact, everything was a warning sign. Everybody goes through every detail of what happened and at every juncture, I could have done something different. I could have prevented that. And there's the guilt right there. And so, the warning signs, I think there are warning signs, but you never know what those warning signs mean until the whole thing's happened. And, people don't, I think we do have to be, there is a list. Casper, do you have a list in front of you of the warning signs? Because I think there are some that, people start to give away their possessions.
There are, and really we're talking about how to deal with the depression so you don't get to that point. And I do encourage people to go to suicide prevention, and they can go to suicide prevention on lifeline.org and call Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. That's suicide prevention lifeline.org, 1-800-273-8255. You got withdrawal, you got giving away of precious possessions, you've got pretending everything's all right when it's obvious that it's not. There's a variety of things that do stand out. We can cover that in the next segment. But the horrible fact is, when you're in the coffin, Lennice, tell them again how the survivors feel.
Awful. Just, it's you've lost a loved one, and you think it's your fault. And the fallout can just be, the whole family, like you said, 20 people can all be feeling like that. And questioning everything that they did, or could have done, and it's a tough thing to recover from.
It is. Now, in 1980, I was in a huge dispute with my mom and dad, and we were not talking. I was going through a horrible divorce with a relationship that I couldn't stand. I had been fired from my job. I had lost respect for the people at my church and my congregation. And my friends were slowly turning their back on me because I was becoming more grumpy and more cantankerous. So I decided at that point to take as many pills as I could get my hands on. About an hour and a half after I did that, I know I'd blacked out. But I do not know why, do not know who, because I even had the phones unplugged and the door locked. But the EMTs were in my bedroom, and I was vomiting up all the pills that I had taken. And had they not gotten there when they did, there would not be you and I having this conversation. I would not have gotten involved with the marijuana movement. I never would have met Jack Hare. I never would have experienced all the love that I've experienced from all the wonderful friends that I have met. And I really mean it when I say when I woke up yesterday morning that I was very blessed to be alive and able to take time for him.
Treating Yourself Journal, the alternative medicine journal, is written and published by patients for patients.
Dr. Claudia Jensen is a clinical instructor at the University of Southern California and a practicing pediatrician who advocates the use of medicinal marijuana for the treatment of ADD and ADHD. Dr. Jensen, good evening.
Treating Yourself Journal has grown to be a worldwide source of valuable information on medical cannabis. And go to treatingyourself.com to check out previews of upcoming issues and events. Treating Yourself Journal provides patients methods on growing medical cannabis for themselves. Also, introducing healthier ways of taking their medicine. Look for Treating Yourself Journal at any Barnes & Noble and Borders bookstores. Go to treatingyourself.com and order 2 subscriptions, one for you and one for your doctor. Treating Yourself Journal, a valuable resource for the global medical cannabis movement.
Online, all the time, your gateway to the world. AFR! American Freedom Radio. Give it to them.
It used to be you were required to go help. And you listen to the love. Let's reenact that again. George Washington, founder of the USA. He was a hemp farmer. Yep, George, he rolled that way. Thomas Jefferson, the founder of the USA, was also a hemp farmer. It was okay back in the day. It used to be a law. You were required to grow hemp. Can you imagine such a law? Let's reenact that law again. George Washington was a patriot. George Washington was a pot patriot. Thomas Jefferson was a patriot. Thomas Jefferson was a pot patriot. Benjamin Franklin owned a mill that made hemp paper. The Declaration of Independence was written on hemp. On August 7, 1765, George Washington wrote this in his diary. Began to separate the male from the female hemp, rather too late. You see, George was bummed because he wasn't just growing hemp for rope. He was growing buds for smoke. Benjamin Franklin was a patriot. Benjamin Franklin was a pot patriot. George Washington was a patriot. George Washington was a pot patriot. Now flash forward. Flash forward to the era of marijuana prohibition, where there's a whole new generation of pot patriots winning the war on education, information, on the cannabis medication. People like Jack Herrera, John Sinclair, Tom Forsyth, Keith Strout, Mark Emery, Dana Beale, David Peel, John Lennon, Paul Krasner, Steve Hager, Jet Baker. Hey, that's me. What about you? Are you a pot patriot? You see, since the 1960s, the start of the re-legalization of cannabis movement, each generation makes some progress, and each generation also learns from the previous generation. So now there's more pot patriots on Earth than ever before. People like Bobby Black, Casper Leitch, Vivian McPeak, Scarlett Swerdlow, Steve Fox, Aaron Houston, oh, so many patriots that are leading the cannabis movement to re-legalization. I wish I could name all of your names, but I know I'm going to forget some people, but I'm going to try. People like Russ Belville, Debbie Goldsberry, Danny Danko, David Gordon, Peter Crist, Steve Silverman, Alan St. Pierre, Josh Schimberg, the Cottonmouth Kings, Richard Lee, General Patton, Dave Bienenstein, Steve Dillon, Willie Nelson, Jorge Cervantes, Steve Blum, Mishka, Brad Ernst, Don Duncan, Marco Renda, Ron Mann, Doug Benson, Ethan Nadelman, Valerie Corral, Ed Rosenthal, Bill Maher, Roger Belknap, Larry, Alec, Audrey, Donna, Elise, Gumba, Anthony, Sarah Newton, Rocker T, Woody Harrelson, Rick Cusick, Tommy Chong, so many pot patriots.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I am your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to the live broadcast of Time for Hemp all around the world on AmericanFreedomRadio.com and on AM/FM stations all across America. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. Tonight's topic is not our usual fare, I must say, but it really demands that we stand up and pay attention to it. I would encourage you, if you're sitting at home feeling as if the world would be a better place without you, get involved in something like the marijuana movement. Call NORML, NORML.org, and get involved in something bigger than yourself. Also call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can call 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. There's a lot of people there who will be happy to help you deal with this. There are people around you who love you, no matter what it is you're dealing with. Now, Lennice, this was really horrible what happened to this remarkable, bright mind at this wonderful university. He was a musician. He had someone in his life who could love him. And that moment of love was taken and broadcast on the Internet. And in a fleeting moment, his whole world turned upside down.
It was tragic, absolutely tragic. And if there had just been any way we could have gotten, and anybody like in that situation, through that tough moment and out the other side alive, that's what we want everybody to do. We want everybody to value their own life. And if you're having a hard time seeing that, seeing how that's possible, well, we're saying, you and I are talking about how taking time for hemp can really help. And I think people need to get that message.
Now we do. Now let's get back to the fact as to how marijuana really can help. Now, I found it to be true. My doctor recommended it. Now, you said this, it's the way the cannabinoids work within the system of the body. It really is. So are there different strands that work better? Is it smoking all day? I mean, is it like smoke in the morning, smoke in the evening, smoke around dinner time, or how do you?
Well, some people just need a little tiny bit. Inexperienced users, don't want to take too much. You know how that can be. Or don't want to take something too strong. And I think that everybody has to find their own strain that works best for them. There's a lot of great new strains, about that. But really, it takes a little bit of experimentation. People, I have to mention again, because I actually am in a state where there's no legal access. And for people in states where there's no legal access, your options are so limited. But, yeah, there are a lot of great strains out there these days.
Marijuana can help, too, with that feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of rage and uncontrolled anger that comes with people who are walking towards the door of suicide. They can help with calm you from acting in a reckless behavior. It can make you feel less trapped. Some people feel they're trapped in a situation. People are hooked on alcohol and feel like because of their alcohol dependency that there might be a reason to off themselves, but actually marijuana is called the gateway drug, and it's true, it's the gateway drug away from everything.
Absolutely. That's so important that people understand that what people tend to do is they'll use cannabis and they'll start dropping all the other drugs. And I've heard this reported so many times, haven't you? But,
I have.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's fascinating. But I think that if you can use cannabis, it can open up your mind to a point where you can feel the love around you. And we were talking about that before the break. But if you can feel the love around you, you're in an ocean of love. Other human beings, no man is an island. And I think cannabis has a lot of potential for preventing suicide. I really do.
Well, see, some of those things that I was just listing were some of the signs of people dealing with the feeling of suicide. They're dealing with feeling of hopelessness. Doctors do encourage that you smoke marijuana who know about using this for depression. It says feelings of rage and uncontrolled anger or the need to seek revenge upon people. Well, if you fire up a joint, you calm down, you get beyond that, right?
Absolutely.
And acting reckless, feeling anxious and agitated or unable to sleep, marijuana will give you a good night's sleep. Mood changes. After you smoke a joint, you might get a mood change, and when you want to go, okay, I'm no longer in the mood for a chocolate brownie, now I'm in the mood for ice cream.
Yeah.
That's about your only mood change. And it helps with other behavior problems like schizophrenia, ADD, and those types of problems that also cause people to have manic problems. Is that right?
Back in the old days, the government used to try to always prove, what was wrong with marijuana. And I'm sure you've heard of all these NIDA studies and everything. And every time they would do one of these studies, they'd find out they couldn't find the harm. And one guy in Richmond, near where I live, he was a scientist, and he was doing studies for NIDA, and they wanted to prove that marijuana would cause cancer. But what he found out was that it prevented cancer. And they swept that under the carpet. So, we need access to the research. We need to know more. But it's apparent that it has a lot of great psychoactive benefits as well as other medical benefits.
People really do face some really horrible problems that they say, well, I don't see how marijuana can get me through this. It can't get me through a bad marriage. It can't get me beyond having my leg chopped off. How is marijuana going to help me deal with this lifelong disease of pick one like hemorrhoids or something like that. I really want to kill myself because of this. They need to realize that it's not the problem. It's the way they're looking at the problem, right?
Yes, and I think that's a really important thing about cannabis is that you can get a very fresh perspective. It'll open your mind up to see reality in a different way. That's called psychoactive. It's not a bad thing. It can be a good thing, especially when you're contemplating something very destructive, or you're in a spot that where you can't figure a way out of it, or you're just so embarrassed or whatever your problem is at that moment, cannabis can open your mind up to a world of new possibilities.
These people who did a streaming of this individual's private sexual activities, I don't know. Maybe I'm over the top. Maybe I'm not thinking rational at the moment, but I really think they should be charged with involuntary manslaughter, or they should be charged with assisted suicide, or they should be charged with attempted homicide or involvement with a homicide. How do you feel?
It'll be interesting to see what kind of legal consequences they face. I'm sure, a lot of times I don't like what prosecutors do, but perhaps in this case we'll agree with the prosecutor and they'll bring charges against these people. But the damage is done, after, we can't go. This is one of those times when what you really want to do is go back in time and undo something that can't be changed now. And there's nothing that can really get us back to where we were before. And that's the tragedy of a situation like this.
Their action caused this reaction. So people really need to stop and think, too, as to not only the person who's killing themselves, but the people who are around that person who might be doing this type of negative activity to another person's life. There's a lot of nasty divorces or brothers and sisters who are waging over money in an estate or a will, or neighbors who are just really venting to see one another have ill fate. And that can really push a person over the edge.
Yeah. And, lots of young people deal with bullying, and I'm glad to see that's finally being recognized as an issue. But there's just all kinds of situations like this at one in particular I've got to say, it was particularly egregious. How could they do that? But the world is full of bullies, of greater and lesser bullies, and it's tough to deal with these situations. But like you said before, call that suicide prevention hotline. Find a friend. Find some cannabis.
Absolutely. I can tell you that when I went through my divorce, I was granted joint custody of my son. And when I went to pick up my son, my ex-wife had disappeared with him, left the state. She quit her teaching job. She had her lawyer bully me by leaving 5 lawsuits on my doorstep that were completely irrelevant, that I was going to have to take my child support money and fight the lawsuit. I went back to the house that I had been living in and looked at the nursery I put together for my son and all the wonderful toys I had for him, and had no idea where in the world he was at. And no one would tell me. And the only person in the world at that point that I loved had been robbed from me, stolen from me, and God allowed that to happen. And I tried to kill myself, I can tell you that. And when I woke up in the hospital, it was a miracle I was still alive, and that I'm able to still take time for him.
I don't hide it.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier medical marijuana physicians clinic in the USA. THCF has offices across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan, and in California, Oregon, Washington State, Montana, Nevada, and Colorado. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 medical marijuana patients obtain their permits to legally possess, use, and grow marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or other neurodegenerative diseases, gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, IBS, AIDS, cancer, spastic conditions, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-01 888 or go to hemp.org. That's HEMP.org. CHCF Medical Clinics at 1-800-723-0188.
No rules. No rules. No taboo topics. No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Well, now, chocolate cake makes my poor stomach ache, and all those pills are too much for me to take. I don't like cocaine 'cause it makes me all uptight, but coffee and reefer makes me feel all right.
Yeah, coffee and reefer does make me feel all right, but coffee can also make you feel a little too depressed, make you jittery. You know, if it's hard on your system, don't take it. Reefer's not for everybody. I'm setting all this comedy aside now for the moment. Sometimes if you smoke it, you do get too paranoid, you do get too unhappy. All right, so then it's not the answer for you. But 99.9% of the people out there, it is the solution. My guest, lovely lady, Lennice Werth, knows about using a medical marijuana to help with depression. Right, Lennice?
Oh, absolutely. It's really quite good for that. I'm not sure it is for everybody, but it's really a great medication for depression. It can help you see all the beauty around you, and it makes you feel better.
It can. It really can. And it really is part of your body. It does work on your brain.
Yeah, like I was saying before, your endocannabinoid system, the part of your body that runs on cannabis-type chemicals, and the cannabis plant mimics these chemicals that are in your body anyway, that keep you in balance and without which you really could not live. And these chemicals in your body, this endocannabinoid system, protects your nerves. And that's why it's so good for things like multiple sclerosis and Lou Gehrig's. But, I mean, if your nerves are also part of that's what's ailing you when you're depressed.
And it also keeps pushing you, too.
Mm-hmm. It's just an amazing plant. Humankind has used it throughout history. This prohibition that we're living in now is a real anomaly. People have considered this medicine from the beginning of time.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. People have been using this back in the 50s as a way of dealing with depression, in the 30s and the 20s. This is not a common solution to this problem.
No, yeah, I mean, it's written up in the old literature. I mean, Queen Elizabeth's Dr. O'Shaughnessy recommended it to her for her PMS. So, but I mean, it goes back to it was in use in China as a medicinal herb very early in history. It's a plant that one of the things that really I always think about is how the pygmies, the African pygmies, they were living in Stone Age conditions when at the beginning of the last century, and when white people first encountered them, or Europeans first encountered them, they were only growing one crop, and that crop was cannabis. They called it daga. So, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that this was maybe one of the very earliest crops ever grown by humankind. And, of course, we use it for all kinds of other things, but cannabis is medicine, and I will stand by that. I mean, it's an amazing medicine.
Because I like to think that as much as I really grieve the passing of this beautiful boy, this remarkable soul, Tyler, that if he would have just stopped and smoked a joint and thought about it, he would have been embarrassed as hell. And then he would have gone over and kicked the guy's ass for doing it and sued the guy. And had a long life, maybe an embarrassing spot to talk about at dinner tables. And that would have been a whole lot nicer than having to put him in the ground.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So even when you're facing the most horrific thing in your life, and you absolutely think you cannot get over this is just too embarrassing, too heartbreaking, too much of a hole of debt for me to dig out of, too lonely, too god-awful. Really, Give it 24, 48 months. We're all going to die anyway. Why rush it?
Yeah, you would. It's hard to even imagine, where he was, emotionally when he realized what had happened. But and he was a musician. I imagine, and from his photographs, I just imagine. I didn't know him, but he looked like a sensitive person. And for a sensitive person in a situation like that, you just can't even imagine how embarrassed he must have felt. But if something could have gotten him through that deep emotional pain that he was feeling, and we still had him with us, the world would be a better place.
Yeah, I do believe it is marijuana, because living with bipolar is hard as hell to do. Excuse the language, but it really is, because you're always moody, you're changing, you don't know why you're happy, because there's no reason to be happy. You don't know why you're sad, there's no reason to be sad. And it's 24 hours a day, 12 months a year, nothing stops it. But when I got high, I was always calm, I could get focused, I could keep a job, I could be nice to people and nice to me.
Yeah, isn't it amazing the way it does that? The way it can take you from a very dark place into a very beautiful light place very quickly. And I think that's another thing. This, when you're in this much pain, it couldn't happen fast enough that your feelings would change and that you would feel better. And cannabis is a quick acting, if it's inhaled, it's a very quick acting substance. It
is. Well, we got to end the program. We're going to be talking about this again in the future. You want to give a shout-out to any particular organization before we say goodbye?
Oh, man. Yes, on Prop 19.
All right. And
what do you think, right? Everybody in California, get out there and vote.
And if you're at home wondering if there's any reason for you to stay alive, there really is. If not for no other reason than to take time for hemp.